program. You know what I mean? We've done this, and I'm doing test into the microphone.
It's okay.
To let them know that we're back. To let them know that we are back. Another week.
And this time we're going to try not to be so long-winded.
That was the longest video. Okay, so that is the longest one we have.
Okay.
Pastor, we are back. Okay, it is another week of Pastor Reacts. And Pastor, today we're going to talk about maybe some stories that people have never heard before. Because I know I hadn't heard some of them before. But Pastor, the title of this video is the most disturbing stories in the Bible, all caps. So he's really serious about this. Back to the guy who we started with, Illustrated Theology, on YouTube. Check him out. He has some pretty solid stuff. Pastor, we're going to jump right in.
Let's go.
The king eaten by worms. Herod Agrippa, a grandson of that Herod who tried to kill Jesus, was a powerful king, surrounded by luxury, influence, and flattery. It was he who had the apostle James, the brother of John, put to death, and then tried to do the same with Peter. One day he appeared wearing shining clothes, literally gleaming, and stood before the people to give a speech. And then something happened that Herod loved. The crowd began shouting, exalting him as if he were more than a man. He did not object. He didn't correct them. He didn't refuse the praise. He simply accepted the adoration as if it were natural. But God was watching. And God does not share his glory with anyone. At that very moment, an angel of the Lord struck him. The king collapsed, and his body began to be eaten by worms from the inside out. A slow, disgusting, and humiliating death. Elisha and the bear's Elisha, a prophet of God, was walking peacefully toward the city of Bethel when suddenly a group of youths appeared. They began to mock, scoff, and ridicule him, shouting, "Go up, thou bald head! Go up, thou bald head!" And then, the divine response came. Elisha turned around, looked directly at the group, and cursed them in the name of the Lord. Immediately, 2 she-bears came out of the woods and mauled them. The result was tragic. 42 youths were torn apart. At first glance, it might seem like an overly harsh punishment for just a tasteless joke about the prophet's appearance. But it was more than that. They were showing contempt for Elisha, for God, and for everything he represented. At that time, Bethel was a center of idolatry. And those young men weren't just laughing. They were rejecting the authority of God, mocking the very God who had raised Elisha as a prophet. Bread baked over dung Ezekiel is the kind of prophet whom God chose to live through some truly unique experiences. To begin with, God commands him to lie on his side for over a year to represent the weight of Israel's sin. While doing this, he had to reenact a military siege, build miniature models of a besieged Jerusalem, and at the same time eat a minimal ration of food, all to symbolize the famine and suffering the people would face. But it didn't stop there. In the middle of this prophetic drama, God gives another command: make bread. So far, so good. But then comes the disturbing detail. This bread was to be baked, using human dung as fuel. In other words, he was to cook using human waste instead of wood. At once, Ezekiel panicked and cried out, "Ah, Lord God, behold, my soul hath not been polluted. For from my youth up even till now have I not eaten of that which dieth of itself, or is torn in pieces, neither came there abominable flesh into my mouth." And God then grants a concession. "Lo, I have given thee cow's dung for man's dung, and thou shalt prepare thy bread therewith." Now we ask, what was the point of all this? God was making something very clear. Just as that bread would be prepared in a filthy, disgusting, impure way, so too would be the life of Israel in exile. They would eat unclean food, suffer shame, humiliation, hunger, and misery. It was a shocking illustration of the spiritual, moral, and social collapse of a people who had turned their backs on God. The king who became a beast, Nebuchadnezzar, was the most powerful man on earth in his time. He ruled over a vast empire, had unimaginable wealth, and governed a city that was one of the wonders of the ancient world, Babylon. One day, he climbs to the rooftop of the palace, looks out over it all, the massive walls, temples, hanging gardens, and says, "Is not this great Babylon, which I have built for the house of the kingdom by the might of my power and for the honor of my majesty?" But here's the thing, God was listening. Immediately, Nebuchadnezzar lost all sanity. His mind collapsed. He began to walk around like an animal, left society, and disappeared from human interaction. He started eating grass like an ox. His hair grew long like eagle's feathers. His nails became like claws. The great king became completely terrifying and unrecognizable, and he stayed that way. 7 times passed while he lived like a wild animal, isolated and humiliated. Until finally it clicked. He lifted his eyes to heaven and praised and honored the Most High, giving glory to the one who lives forever. At that moment his sanity returned. His kingdom was restored, and Nebuchadnezzar learned, through the most painful means possible, a lesson that applies to every human being. God humbles those who exalt themselves, and he exalts those who humble themselves. Jephthah's vow. Jephthah was the kind of person who, in the heat of desperation, made a promise that no one should ever make. He was about to enter a decisive battle against the Ammonites, and wanting to ensure victory, he made a vow. If thou shalt without fail deliver the children of Ammon into mine hands, then it shall be that whatsoever cometh forth from the doors of my house to meet me when I return in peace from the children of Ammon shall surely be the Lord's, and I will offer it up for a burnt offering. Without thinking of the consequences, without weighing his words, he made a reckless, dangerous, and completely foolish vow. And then, tragedy. Jephthah wins. Not because of his absurd vow, but because God delivered the Ammonites into his hands. And when he returns home, his only daughter comes out to greet him, dancing, joyful, celebrating her father's victory. The text isn't fully clear on what happened next. Some believe she was literally sacrificed as a burnt offering, a human sacrifice, something God never required and in fact abhors. Others argue she was not killed, but was consecrated to a life of total dedication to God. No marriage, no children, no descendants. They point to clues in the text, like when she asks for 2 months to mourn. Not her death, but her virginity. That is the fact that she would never marry or bear children. Either way, the weight of the story is crushing. It's sad. It's deeply unsettling, and it carries a warning. We lose many blessings for not truly knowing the God we serve. If Jephthah had truly known the Lord, he would never have made such a foolish vow.
Okay, Pastor. It's about halfway through.
Okay.
How are we feeling?
Feeling good.
Okay, any comments about any of these stories? About worms or bald prophets by chance?
Okay. Herod was an evil man.
He was.
He was killing our brothers and sisters.
Amen.
And then he decided to do what Satan did, take the glory for himself. Poof, he gone.
Yeah.
Now, what's the problem with the bald-head prophet?
Well, I don't know if there's anything wrong with it. I just, something I feel like you could possibly relate.
I don't, how? Because I'm a bald-headed prophet?
Are there any bears? I'm trying to, look, I think some of these stories were, I grew up in church. Okay, that's really the whole point of the podcast. And I never have ever heard of Herod getting eaten alive. I didn't even know Herod had a son.
It was his grandson.
Still, he has to have a son to have a grandson. Didn't know that was the thing.
Okay, Herod, listen, Herod, like Caesar, are just names that are...
Oh, well, that's even worse. Elisha, okay, didn't know Elisha was killing kids.
They were not children, they were young men.
Sure, youths. Sorry. Elisha should have just...
Okay, let's define youth. They could have been 18, 19.
Sure, you're saying young men, and that's fine. They should know better, and that's why the bears killed them.
They did, because remember, Elijah got caught up in a chariot, in a whirlwind, and went to heaven. So they thought they'd be funny. Go up, thou bald head. You do what your master did. Oh, yeah, okay. Well, yeah, and he just turned around and cursed him.
And that's why you shouldn't tell everybody what's going on spiritually with you, you know?
But you need to understand, he had twice as many miracles as Elijah did.
Yeah, and he healed a guy with his bones. So
yeah, exactly.
But, God telling Ezekiel to make some bread over poop is tough. I'm sure there's more reason, and maybe one day I'll read Ezekiel. Won't be anytime soon after that story.
But see, that's no different than what was his name? If I was looking at the books of the Bible, I could tell you.
Okay.
But there was one of the prophets that went out and married a prostitute.
Actually,
And every time she would run away to do her prostitute, he'd go get her. Why? Because the children of Israel were prostituting on God with other gods.
and he had to go get him every time.
And he had to go get. So what, we didn't have the illustrator to paint the picture, so God had to do it in living color.
Okay, well, shouts to the Wayans. The king who became a beast, didn't know our boy Nebi went wild, but I do know in that story that he did come back. He realized, there is only one true God. I don't know how many times he has to throw somebody in a furnace or watch somebody come out of a lion's den, but I do know that he learned his lesson after he became a beast. And then this last guy kind of stinks. He's just not, you can't be putting your daughter's life on the line. But what do you think, Pastor? Do you think she's dead? Or do you think that she just died of virgin?
I'd always interpret it as he sacrificed her. But you have to understand, if you made a vow before God, you carried out that vow no matter how detrimental, no matter how.
Yeah, I just can't see God allowing that.
Okay.
In his name to be sacrificed for humans is just...
that was the vow and the promise that he made. But
gotta be man of your word. That's true.
Wait a minute. How many times have we said, Lord, you get me through this? I swear, I declare, I'm going to do X, Y, Z.
One too many is the answer there, Pastor.
Yeah, and then you don't do it.
Yeah.
That's why the book of Ecclesiastes, which is known as the book of the preacher, tells us it's better to not make a vow than to make one and don't keep it. But like the illustrator said, what you need to do is you need to know the God that you're dealing with.
Yeah, you do need to know that.
Satan didn't care that, this guy's only daughter.
Yeah.
He didn't care.
Pastor, we only have a couple more stories, okay? There's about 12. We're not going through all 12. A couple of them we've talked about many times on this podcast. So we have about 3, maybe 4, depends on how I feel. But definitely these next 3 are going to be played, and then we'll wrap it up. So Here we go.
Go for it.
The death of the firstborn. Imagine the scene. Midnight. Total silence. And then, something terrible. In every house in Egypt, someone dies. Every firstborn. No exceptions. From Pharaoh's own son, heir to the throne, to the son of the servant grinding grain, even to the firstborn of animals in the stables, no one was spared. And silence turns to screaming. Despair. A collective cry that fills the land. All of this happened because God hadn't been ignored once, or twice, or 3 times. There were 9 warnings, 9 plagues, 9 chances. Water turned to blood, frogs, lice, flies, disease on the livestock, boils, hail, locusts, darkness. And in each case, Pharaoh hardened his heart, refusing to let go of the people who belonged to the Lord. Then came the 10th, the limit. The houses that had the lamb's blood on the doorposts were spared. But for those who resisted, the night became tragedy, a harsh reminder that defying God always comes at a cost. And this is, without a doubt, one of the most disturbing stories in the Bible. Lot and his daughters. After the destruction of Sodom, Lot fled with his 2 daughters to live in a cave. Worried that there were no men left in the area to have intimate relations with, the daughters made an unthinkable decision. They got Lot drunk and slept with him. Not once, but twice, on consecutive nights. The result of this deeply sinful act was 2 sons, who later became the ancestors of 2 nations that would have a long history of conflict with Israel, the Moabites and the Ammonites. This story is as disturbing as it is tragic. It shows how distance from God can lead people to make morally twisted decisions, choices that, in any normal circumstance, would be utterly unthinkable. These women left Sodom, but Sodom had not left them, the Levite's concubine. This is, without exaggeration, one of the darkest stories in the entire Bible, and honestly, it's not there by accident. What happens here is a shocking portrait of what a society becomes when it turns its back on God. Here's the setting. A Levite, a man who, in theory, should be an example, is traveling with his concubine. They need a place to spend the night and end up stopping in the town of Gibeah, which belonged to the tribe of Benjamin. Important detail. This was a town of Israelites, people who, in theory, knew the law of God. But in practice, they were utterly corrupt. While staying in the home of an elderly man, a group of local men surrounded the house during the night. They began banging on the door, shouting that they wanted the Levite so they could abuse him. Yes, you heard that right. They wanted to rape him. Then comes one of the most revolting parts of the story. The Levite, in an act of cowardice and selfishness, throws his concubine outside, hands her over like a piece of meat to satisfy the rage and perversion of those men. What happens next is heartbreaking. They abuse her all night, relentlessly, until, at dawn, she can no longer bear it. She collapses at the doorstep, destroyed, exhausted, and dies there, lying on the ground. In the morning, the Levite walks out and finds her body, discarded like trash, and his coldness is shocking. Without showing a shred of humanity, he simply loads her body onto a donkey and heads home. Once there, he does something that defies comprehension. He cuts her body into 12 pieces and sends a piece to each of the 12 tribes of Israel. He wanted all of Israel to see with their own eyes just how far they had fallen. Israel without God, without leadership, without law, without covenant, had become a new Sodom, a morally rotten, spiritually bankrupt, and socially destroyed society. This event became a national shame in Israel's history, so much so that the prophet Hosea references it twice. Amnon and Tamar.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That was who married the prostitute.
That's why he was able to relate to the story of the Levite there. So, Pastor, obviously we went through some big ones there, okay? Some heavy ones for those who may not know the Bible has real stories like that.
Oh, yeah, it does. But, again, the illustrator did a good job.
Yeah, he's really good. I like this guy.
It's not just the pictures, but it's this is what happened and this is why it happened. And if you don't get yourself together, you know.
So the death of the firstborn, obviously, that's one we kind of talked about last week. And obviously, we know what happens there, you know. That's the final one. You put the blood on the blood of the...
No. Again, you have to go back all the way to Genesis, either 14 or 18, I forget which one, when God told Abraham that his descendants would be put into slavery. But, you know, God would judge that nation.
Yeah.
And you know, if you read the verse tells you that God hardened Pharaoh's heart.
Yes, it does.
No, but, you know, it's not God is out there hardening people's heart just so he can punish them.
Yeah.
He knew that Pharaoh was not going to change. So he'd already and he just allowed his heart to stay hard.
Yeah. So that obviously is tough.
No, what's tough is Lot and his daughters.
Lot and his daughters, I think, is not only a cautionary tale, like he said, about how, you know, we have to be careful not to bring where we came from with us. Yeah, but here's
what concerns me. I think that would be terrible to say. I can't say that.
Okay, well, that's good.
It had to do with education. And but if they're thinking that there are no more men left in the world,
well, I mean, hey, you know, you just watched your home and the sister city to that home get obliterated out of nowhere in the middle of the desert. And I've never been to a desert, but I can imagine it is pretty intimidating to look out. But I do think it's also important that we realize that Abraham, you know, had a child out of God's plan, and he became the Islamic faith, thanks to Ishmael. And then this guy, Lot, did the same thing with his daughters. Not him, his daughters more so. Also, let's be a good parent and not drink around our kids. But he creates two of the biggest, as he said, rivals to the children of Israel. The last one, Pastor, that we'll touch on. Hey, the Levite has to figure that out. Okay, first off.
But you have to understand. You have to understand. Women were property.
No, I'm not talking that part. Unfortunate.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
You were talking about.
He can't be a man. No, I understand what he did, and again, the illustrator does a good job of telling us why he did the cutting up and all that. Not saying it's good, but unfortunately I do understand it.
Okay.
It's a big thing, and I think it does plague ministers today. Okay, the Levites were supposed to be the example of the 12 tribes.
Okay.
And he has a concubine out there, and I know he was supposed to be out there with Shoddy, okay? And he was. And I think that we often sometimes watch religious leaders and ministers and all those kind of things from all types of religions, not just Christianity, but I'll talk about us because I don't want to offend anybody.
There you go.
like we watch all the time. I mean, Jimmy Swaggart, back in the day.
Rest in peace.
Yes, well, okay. Yes, of course. Rest in peace. But, even Tony Evans recently, right? Some of these things that they come back and they become this, but it is still a cautionary tale that, guess what? Nothing's new under the sun. Mm-hmm. And they dealt with it back then, unfortunately, to a much larger scale. Luckily, Jimmy Swaggart wasn't cutting anybody up and sending them to all the mega churches in America to tell them how far he's fallen. But we have to be careful that we read these kind of stories and not avoid them. While they are a little graphic, again, it's history. But
okay. Let me remind you and our listeners of something that I say often.
Yeah.
That people misunderstand. The Bible is not a religious book.
No.
It's a political and military book, because that's what you're dealing with.
Yes, it is a battlefield.
And in the midst of that, God is trying to insert some morality and some...
100%.
So we sit there and we think, oh my God, I can't believe that that's in the Bible. Well, we're dealing with real issues, with real people.
Yes.
And I think the tendency is for some of us to think that the only things that are in there is David, slaying a giant with a rock, and Jesus feeding, 5,000 with 5 loaves and 2 fishes. No.
Well, again, we have to read the whole Bible.
Yeah.
And you have to understand the context, which I said we're going to talk about a couple more times. You have to understand why some of this stuff is happening, Mm-hmm. While it is gruesome and tough, and it has happened in modern day, not necessarily with religious people, but to cut up somebody's body and to ship it to it. At that point, though, like Pastor said earlier, there was no other way to illustrate it sometimes. Sometimes God just had to show you what it's about. And
even if it means making a prophet lay on his one side, on his other.
390 days.
And then to cook his food with...
well, you got to cook your food dung.
Cow dung.
You got to. And originally it was supposed to be human dung. But guys, the point is that there's a lot in the Bible that we skip over. Mm-hmm. You're not going to learn this stuff in Sunday school, okay? Unless your Sunday school teacher is...
me.
Far off the trail what kids should be reading. But as you mature and as you get older, and especially those of you who are adults who are coming into it, this is the kind of stuff that once you understand some of the New Testament stuff like John and maybe the letters of Paul, you can go in and read the stuff and see, like, life was real back in the deserts of the promised land and all that.
The crazy thing is the location may change, but the stories are still poignant and relevant.
They matter. It's not an outdated book. I don't care what anybody on a college campus says. Okay, but that being said, Pastor, when you're doing this stuff, right? You're doing this kind of stuff. Listening to us, listening to Illustrated Theology, which I do encourage most of you to go check out his YouTube channel. It's very, very important. Very important.
It is.
That you get spiritually fed, because if not, you'll be emotionally led. And with that, go and grow with purpose. Peace.